Good evening, everyone. I'm Gogo Lerato. After so long, this is a really impromptu. I haven't done teachings in over a year. I was still growing spiritually. I was going through a lot myself. I'm not quite expecting anybody to be here, but that's okay because this is an interesting, or rather a sensitive topic, and I'm going to sort of explain it, but only because I'm doing classes. And people who need to join classes have been unsure which class to join and why, and all of that. So today I'm going to teach about Israel. For those who know me, you guys know Hore Sephiri is, I love it, versus Throny, right? People have used the two, the one Sephiri, Throny have been sort of used, the words have been used interchangeably, or sort of been assumed to mean the same thing, but no, they don't. They don't mean the same thing, okay? So I wanted to pray and then I'm going to start on the teaching, okay? Ntatarna magodimong bitso la o le haletswe o tle moswa o thatwetse lefatsheng jalo ka etswa lodimo o re fe ka jeno bobe bo re lekane ba tsatsing le leng o re tshwarele melato ya rona jalo ko re tshwela ba re setelwang o se re se moleko mo re ho ye mobe bane muso kwa hao le matla le kganya le kgalejwe le ka o sa feleng. Amen. Amen. Okay, let me read the Bible. And I just want to get the right light. Okay, let me read the Bible and then we start today's class. Lebitso la ntate la morale mahelang. Amen. Morena wena o lokile le dikahlolo tsa hao di nepahetse. Temoso tseo o faneng ka tsona di lokile, di tshepahala haholo. Tjheseho ya ka ya nqeta hobane ba ntlhoileng ba lebala mantswe ya hao. Tshepiso ya hao ke ya nnete, mohlanka wa hao wa e rata. Ke monyenyane ke ya nyediseha empa ditaelo tsa hao ha ke di lebale. Amen. I always read Psalm 119. I always end up here for the classes. So that's it, Psalm 119 verses 137 to 141. Okay. For those that know Israel or Sephiri, don't be alarmed. I'm not going to be teaching anything about the codes. The point is not to break Israel down again for those who've been there. The point is to teach about the history of Israel for those who've been there and those who have not been there, and mainly to teach what is the difference. Okay, so let's start ka Sephiri. So Sephiri was there. It's probably over 100 years old because my great-grandmother went. My grandmother went there, she says, over 50 years ago. Sephiri is quite old. And if you guys remember, I've done a few teachings where I've said bungaka lis profeto are expressions of Sephiri, right? So this is in the context that I mean. Previously, people just went to the Orthodox churches, right? My belief is that Sephiri was founded by a group of different people who had moved from the rural areas and had spiritual gifts, right? But because at the time all that there was Orthodox churches, the space or the creation of a like a spiritual church had not yet been done, right? I do believe that Sebeletso came first, even before ZCC, Libo Postola and that, right? Because at the time, going to a prophetic church was not something that people really wanted to be associated with. At the time, religion was still part of a political movement. Religion was part of a political structure. And our ancestors knew that, right? They followed religion not only to be able to masquerade their spiritual gifts, right? But also it was a way of finding their own roots despite the the Areas Act, despite the Witchcraft Act. This was their way of still connecting with their relatives, right, from different parts of South Africa, despite where they've been placed, despite what they believed in, right? I do private classes as well, where I teach different types of msamo, right? So the first msamo would be the kraal. You know, most of our families were coming from rural areas where they would have had some type of form of wealth in the form of dikgomo or land or whatever. Land that we know that was eventually sort of taken from them forcefully. Land also that they lost because now it became more conducive, probably through the mines, to come to the cities and work in the cities, right? So now everybody needed to migrate here to be able to work, right? Yet, despite the fact that they needed to move, it did not take away their knowledge of their ancestral connection, their knowledge of their forefathers and the things that had been done. Honestly speaking, considering how that knowledge was looked down upon, it only made sense for that knowledge to be translated into Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, right? And Throny came much later. So Tshebeletso ya Sephiri then became like a conglomerate, like a group of spiritual and people who didn't know they were spiritual, right? At the time, you didn't need to dream of being there. There had not been a calling associated to it, right? At the time, our forefathers went to go and experience their spirituality, right? So for those who've been with Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, you know the gist of Tshebeletso ya Sephiri is identifying Christ through the Old Testament. That is the most defining factor, right? So at the time, it was a hidden revelation that our forefathers had of Christ, the evidence of Christ, of the evidence of Jesus Christ in the Old Testament, in the old way of doing things. And this became relevant because the Mosaic law very much outlined things similar to African tradition and African spirituality, right? So this is now already, Israel became like a decoding of the Mosaic law and not even looking at the source of it as maybe a Judaist book or, you know, a book from Judaism, but it became, through Israel, the Mosaic law became applicable to the individual. It became applicable to the group of people who would attend Kereke ya Sephiri. So they would have all sorts of revelations. For anybody who's ever been to Kereke ya Sephiri or go Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, you know, once you'd be shocked, you know, people that you would assume are not learned, people that you would assume are not intelligent. It's when you hear them speak through the text, they make it very clear, very evident that the text of the Bible, the entire Bible, even the Old Testament, is a prophetic book, right? So Bagolo ba rona used the Old Testament as a prophetic book, a book that did not speak to the chronological part of what prophecy has become today. So what does that mean? Today, people talk about end of times. People talk about, and by the way, end of time story has been there for so long. End of times has been there for so long. There's been lots of people, messiahs, who've claimed to have met Jesus, and within their timeline, always declare some form of Armageddon or end of times. So, Bagolo ba rona, through Israel, knew that end of times, as we understand it, is not a chronological event that's going to happen to mankind as an entirety. They knew that end of times represented the end of one's special or one's unique journey from one level of revelation and connection to Christ or to God and Badimu. Well, at the time, Badimu not, right? It's the move, it's the evolution of one ending time between your understanding, your revelations of Christ through the Old Testament even, to another. So, Sephiri, an end of times dream even, or an end of times book, especially you find it in the book of Daniel, where you see what is, what's to come in the living creatures. Go Israel, it was a unique personal end of time where it's like you had your consciousness that had been marked from a certain time in your life, right? And broken or ends at a certain time, that in the same way that Jesus Christ had resurrected, that you would resurrect within you a certain spirit of heaven, spirit of the divine, right? So that's what Israel was. That's what Israel was. That's what Israel still is today, right? And it's very interesting that even back then, the practice was more Old Testament based, right? This is just where they prove you through Israel, you learn that from the book of Genesis, right through to the last letter of the Bible, there is evidence of the prophecy of Christ, right? There is the evidence of the prophecy of the Christ consciousness and the Christ mentality. It hadn't yet been placed that way at the time because Bagolo Barona, they followed Tshebeletso ya Sephiri intuitively, right? Okay. So what happened was then they would go Tshebeletso every Wednesday, right? Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, people ne go ya ka di Laboraro, right? It would typically be Tshebeletso ya Bosigo. People would go at night, 7, 8 in the evening, right through. If you were a newbie, you would be initiated into Tshebeletso ya Sephiri over the whole night, right? So being a newbie was not taken lightly. You were being initiated overnight through the Bible, right? But the old Tshebeletso ya Sephiri only ended at level 5, right? So for those who know Tshebeletso ya Sephiri and the levels, they only ended at the level where you are almost muruti, musebeletsi, right? They only ended there. And right through the levels, you would wear only speakers as a white and a white duke, right? Initially, it was also a duke ya mukhai. It needed not be a white duke. However, when you got to level number 4, which is the level where we say that you are declared a healer, right? Then that's where the white duke would be a prerequisite. The old Israeli, they would wear white, and the garment would be primarily white with blue. It would be blue tassels or blue cross. But at the time, the old Israel was set up to be white and blue. All right. So that's the one form of Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, the one that is more common. All right. So how did it change to becoming what it is today? Right. For those again who know. Then there was a man who I believe his family, his relatives should write a book about. But it would be difficult to write a book about this man. This man was Ntate Mathiga, right? This man had gone to initiate, had gone to Twasa Badimu, like the traditional way. Before him, it was unheard of. It was unheard of to go in Twasa Badimu, right? Because of the orthodox that I've just explained, ya Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, This man went to Twasa. I believe he might have grown up in Israel, but life and his ancestors guided him towards a different way. So he went to go and Twasa, the tradition, Badimu, the Mundaos, and all of that. At the time as well, I can assure you, there weren't all these spirits that we know now. You know, the Mundaos and the that and the that. You either had a traditional gift to be a Sangoma or not, right? So I believe, well, this is from my interactions with meeting this man. I've left the earrings on purpose. And you're going to understand why. So this man, I've only ever met him through readings, through his distant relatives, right? So Ntate Matiga went to go and Twasa, right, the traditional way. And when he came back, for some reason, I believe he was given a spiritual inspiration by Linyelwila Israel and by his ancestors, where he had gone to Twasa. This man came back and started to merge the two concepts, right? Previously before him, there had not been a Zozi or a Badimu element. Perhaps he was the first to have his ancestors sort of interweave and marry the concept ya Israel with Bungaga, right? With Bungoma. Before that, wearing beads, wearing bangles was not allowed. You had to just be as you are. And like Gogo Kidiboni is saying, you were not allowed to wear earrings. You were not even allowed to have makeup. You were not allowed to have lipstick. You were not allowed to have anything. Okay. So Ntate Matiga went, and with him, because Israel had been given to him by spiritual inspiration and an in-depth knowledge of traditional ways, right, through his Twasing journey, he now started to shape Israel in a different trajectory, right? Now, that's where we started to see the yellow, the yellow colors. Blue and white is very much associated with Sephiri, right? Blue and white has always been symbolic for Sephiri and later Apostolic Church, okay? But Ntate Matiga started to bring up the yellows, the greens, your more earth colors, your more ancestral connected colors, purples, maroons. That's what it was because of also the popularity that he gained, right? He started to teach his children Bamoya when he had his church in Israel in the form of a school. Unlike what it used to be, no, nothing deep, no special codes. There were codes, but codes to a certain limit, right? My belief is that Ntate Matiga is the one who now extended that, right? And started to open the channel between, or create the link between Linyelwila Israel, le Sidimu, le Badimu, right? Oh yeah, no, Gogo, look here, so I'm also not allowed to. Well, I haven't asked, but I'm not allowed to. I don't try to do it, right? But here, it's my platform, and I'm going to explain to you why, right? So then Ntate Matiga became very popular, right? He started attending Misebetsi. He was very strict. He started the school element, the education element of Israel. He began that, right? He had a lot of children, Bamoya, a lot of gobelas, right? A lot of gobelas, and a lot of basebeletsi that are more traditional inclined, that align lisetso, right? Are still indirectly his grandkids Bamoya, his children Bamoya, and that. He became popular. Lesotho, Free State, the Val, he became popular, right? Ntate O was the first person to successfully have Israel almost running like impande, right? Where he was moving from one place to another and all of that. And the people, his students, he got to teach them very well, right? Then, as he died or got older, the students and the grandkids, Bamoya, started to see his bravado. So he was known to have a certain poise. He was not money driven, but he believed in opulence, right? His form of worship was giving generously, and he instilled that within his children. So tables, offerings, everything was very opulent, and he started to demand that, right? As a way to sort of say to people, hey, you've got to give generously. I believe Ntate Matiga was actually giving us a basic rules of laws of attraction, right? So he started to bring many elements that had to do with the human element, with the African element, back into Tshebeletswa's Phiri, right? But as he grew older, people started just to associate just the opulence and his strictness, right, for the law of the Old Testament, right? Because Old Testament is the foundation of Tshebeletso, right? His children and his grandchildren, Bamoya, started to misunderstand his perspective, because I suppose when you've been spiritually inspired to create a particular movement, you would be doing it prophetically, or you would be prophesying or whatever. Previously, Tshebeletso a go profetiwe, right? To this day, a go profetiwe. But I believe that the Matiga now started to cultivate prophets leading within the church, right? Because he taught them that through the routine of learning and prayer and learning to Tshebeletso, just like you do in Pandeni, then you can learn or activate your third eye. So as people started to realize his opulence, without understanding that his third eye had been opened up, and that he had a lot of different various experiences in his twaso, right? Atwasam badimu in very different elements, le manyeloi, and bringing about the different garments as well. And also I feel inspiring and finding texts where now people could move to higher levels, moving to higher places. What's Tshebeletso, right? Then now there became almost like a misunderstanding of what this man, perhaps his Linyeloi, meant to do, right? Then people started now to wear traditional clothes to Tshebeletso, right? At some point, I suppose, even I would from time to time on my waist. But then again, it became kind of like, okay, a traditional cloth on your waist is kind of like you're wearing a skirt, so it's not a big deal, right? But then now, the beads, right? The beads, there was the introduction of the ancestral element, right? As Israel was moving more in the ancestral element direction, with the direction of Ntate Matiga, on the other end of the previous Israel, right? Now the Witchcraft Act had been sort of broken down, and people went out and started the apostolic churches, the St. John's churches, Ntate Lekganyane as well. It almost feels coincidental, right? It almost feels coincidental that now, as this man on this side was sort of channeling the more ancestral element, and I do believe that it's got to do with the be you, who you are, right? Then others started to now go into the prophetic churches, ZCC, St. John's, St. Paul, and all of those churches. Okay. So then Israel on its own, the old Israel still, now moved in this direction, right? So, for those who now had ancestors that were linked to the old Israel, the bringing in of your yellows and your reds and all of these things, lima bayi, linyelwila Israel, or those who've got ancestors by Israel Khali, that now started to become something that speaks against the fundamentals of what Israel was, right? Israel, like I've always explained, Bungakas Profito are all expressions of Israel. So for those whose grandparents, great-grandparents still belonged to that Israel, the first one, right? The one where you could not associate Badimu directly, but you could find wisdom through the Christ consciousness of the Old Testament. For those who have those Badimu, this Israel, which evolved because people didn't know what he was trying to teach, and because people now started to focus a lot on the fact that he had gone to Twasa, and they associated Twaso le tshebeletso ya Sephiri. These people, their manyelois would show them that there's something going wrong in this church, and that there's witchcraft being done in this church. These are all just perceptions of linyelwela tshebeletso ya Sephiri. Now, like I said when I taught about linyelwela tshebeletso ya Sephiri, now when I started, the fundamental is to find the Christ consciousness, to find the principles that bring the awareness and spiritual evolution, spiritual ascendance, right? Be it through an Old Testament book, a Psalm, or a New Testament book. That was the gist of Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, right? And when this new interpretation remained, right, it became more lucrative. Let me say that, because Ntate Matira did promote opulence. Now, people started to find the gap here where they could begin what we are calling impande today, right? People started to now want the opulence associated with Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, the opulence associated with being spiritual, right? Here. And people started to misunderstand his teachings as meaning that if you go and Twasa Badimu, then you will be living a particular lifestyle, or a Tshebeletso ya Sephiri is going to be in a particular way, right? I've gone to many Tshebeletos and I have seen this element, right? It's gotten to a point where people now wear traditional cloths almost as full garments with Tshebeletso, which is not quite in alignment with Linyelwela Israel. Okay, Linyelwela Israel is a blank canvas. I've explained this in previous classes. It's a blank canvas. Linyelwela Israel is actually an energized spirit, right? It's not attached to any specific form of healing, right? So now the ancestral element of this energetic healing Linyeloi, which was, by the way, water-based originally, water and air-based. Israel is actually the combination of all the 5 elements of healing, right? And now only the element of fire and the element of spirit, right? And probably the element of earth, fire, and spirit elements now were acknowledged, right? And people now started to promote an Israeli that looks a lot like Khotwasa, right? In a way, it was problematic, but today it has proven very useful, because if you have had Ndwaso, The only way to reverse Ntwaso, you are not. If una linyelwe la Sephiri, ko tshebeletsong ya Sephiri, we don't drink blood strictly, right? At all. If you have had Ntwaso and you were not supposed to, going to this form of Israel with the earth, fire and water, fire and spirit element are being recognized. This would be the easiest way ukuhlanjulula that dlozi, right? Ukuhlanjulula that energy, right? You would start here. This place here where they're still wearing the traditional clothes, it would make sense to you, right? Because you've gone ephehlweni, right? You would really be purifying your dlozi ngelosi back really to this Israel, right? So the two polarities, the Israeli, right, they still work hand in hand, right? In the sense that as you understand more spiritually, it's funny that you will regress towards the older Israel, where white and blue, trims of blue would be the primary colors. You would gravitate towards that. Okay? So that's what happens. That is the benefit of this form of Israel, right? Today, a lot of people are practicing this form of Israel. And this form of Israeli is sensitive in the sense that you would need to go to somebody who knows or practices this form of Israel, but knows the ins and outs of this one, right? Some people, and we've seen this, you can go in Twasa and Kobela puts on beads on you, but you are meant to be more prophet, right? If you are meant to be more prophet, you're going to end up more prophet. Everything that you do, Yaharu will show more prophet, and you are not umgoma, right? So this element of Israel became like the ubungoma element, but the truth behind Linyelwela's Sephiri is that it's a prophetic and actually an energist entity, right? So, how does Holy Communion connect with Israel? I can't really go into detail, but I will say it like this. Linyelwela Israel is mainly water-based, so the drinking of alcohol is not allowed, right? Drinking of alcohol is not allowed. Holy Communion became the part of religion that was still now placed in the Orthodox churches. Remember now, Israel was founded when our forefathers were attending Orthodox churches. So they could have their Holy Communion, go Orthodox church, right? And go Israel, it was water. It still is, right? So now, Bakamo, Israeli, when you have got Linyelwela, the old Israel, where you will dream of white with blue, right? Or you are dreaming you're in a white building, or you are dreaming you're at a white mall, you have Linyelwela Israel Lakhali, right? But Linyelwela perceives this Israel as the corrupt one, as the perverted one, right? It would seem perverted because, like I'm saying, Israel was largely based on the Bible, still is, right? A lot of masquerading happens for Israel, right? It's a revelationary journey, right? So now people started wearing mabai and all of that. And probably in the footsteps of Ntate Matira, people started becoming traditional healers and having churches to Israel, right? Now, here's the conundrum. Israel strictly says forbids Ntwaso, right? And what traditional healers did in pursuit of the opulence of being spiritually awoke or of being a gobela, people started with, even though they had their own Israel churches, or they had some form of Linyelwela Israel or a connection, Mewa Moya wa Israel, people started to now promote ubungoma because Ndwaso was more expensive, right? By definition, Israel is meant to be free, right? And I am truly, hoping that Israel, be it the school, be it the classes, let us start to charge, because that is the way that people should really go. But it became something that was not lucrative now to a person who had their own church, yeah, Israeli, kanti they could go and just twasa and give their children bamoya ndwaso. Then a whole array of wrong things were put in, right? And people started now in their churches, because now remember, each person, if you've had a church open for you by your spiritual mother, then the church runs according to your perception. Why? Because Israel is an energist spirit, right? So your church would run according to your perception of spirituality. And that's where now people started to now introduce Israeli, right? They don't physically do the ndwasos like within the church. That's never allowed, right? But now we're seeing traditional cloths, mudimadi toho, and also Gobelas would then say, no, you need to twasa first, go through ndwaso, then I'll take you through Israel. But it's because they knew that it's not supposed to be that way, right? In actual fact, if we suspect that somebody's got a spiritual gift, a calling, an ancestral one, we should begin with Israel first, that version of Israel first, and then lead them to this older version of Israel, and then see what needs to be done. Okay. So what happened to this old version? The old version became your St. John's, your those churches, right? Then through Linyelila, St. John, St. Paul, the churches where they were white, Israel now converted, evolved into Linyelila Throny, right? Throny is Israeli in the outside context. So spirit is Sephiri because it's hidden, it's within. You've got to be mutwa spirit to know the Lord was Sephiri. Throny, you don't need to be mutwa spirit, right? Throny is very much linked or aligned with the Linyelua, St. John, St. Paul, the Linyelua that wears white, all white, right? So then the old Israelites started to say, okay, because Tebeleto used to be on Wednesdays at night, if we are going to change to ZCC, Postola, St. John, St. Paul, which are Sunday churches, then Linyelua Israeli, the old one said, but the Wednesday vacancy is still required because I am channeling energy, right? Prophetic, spiritual energy to those who went with Tebeletzong. But they are using this prophetic energy in churches Samoya, Tsamutsikari. Hence, Throny evolved. That's where Throny comes from. Throny, Li Israeli, they are not interchangeable. They don't mean the same thing, but they do have the same source, right? The same source that now Israeli is a more masculine energy, more masculine entity, right? So Israel would be, let's say, God the Father. Throny would be a feminine entity, the feminine counterpart to Israel that could be expressed anyway, right? Throny now would be God, the Holy Spirit, right? A lot of what we call New Age churches are indirectly promoted Kilinyelwela Throny, right? Where people will wear white and people will pray only to a Jesus, where people will speak only of a Jesus, and angels, right? Linyelwela Throny is more rigid in that sense, right? Lenyalo la Throny will not acknowledge Badimu in the traditional sense, right? Okay, but as Throny came out here, Throny is the outside, the exposed version of the old Israel. Okay, then there was the Israeli Yantate Maticha, which evolved into the Bangoma, or the ancestral version of Israel, right? But because there were some people who came or originated from the old Israel that has now become Throny, and they still felt to keep the code remained, right? Throny, there's no code, right? Or rather, the code is given biblically to the individual. Throny is like a download, right? You don't need Mewa Moya for Throny, right? Normally, Throny, you'll be given Mangwala thing. Most of you guys are given Mangwala Throny and you don't even know it, right? When you are given your white garments, right? Or when your third eye, Libaluzi, starts to open up, they love to connect with Throny, right? But there was a portion of the people of the first Israel who now said, no, we don't align with the ancestral Israel. We want to keep the code, but make this Israel a prophetic Israel, right? And then that started the Israel under the new covenant. For those who know, you know, right? Then that became now another diversion of Israel under the new covenant, right? And under the new covenant, they really should be wearing your blues and your whites, right? They have taken some concepts from the earthly or the ancestral Israel, in the sense that they might say you will use the yellow, right? So the Israel, the new covenant, believes also in prayer. They don't use swashos. They don't use anything. They believe in prayer and water. That's it. Tapelo is the main thing, right? And now, again, there with the new covenant, where I've seen now over the years of me doing readings, people have experienced problems because now some people have also started to see or dream of garments that they want to sort of make into a uniform. But they forget that the new covenant should actually be very similar to the old Israel, right? What I've also realized is that people under the new covenant are people that were put through Israel initiation. Kadi Bible scriptures, Throny, and a few of the ancestral Israel, right? So those people have also had issues with now what should be done, right? According to the new covenant, I don't know if it is like that, but I remember praying Israel about it. According to the new covenant, right, you should end also at level 5, right? And then go ube musebelezi, right? But I believe the new covenant is being run like as an internal thing also, where you are musebelezi, you are still a musebelezi within the church and not outside, right? Versus the ancestral Israel, where now musebelezi ba gago or bongaka ba gago, you practice it kontle, right? So now there is now 2 types of Israels. One that is prophetic based and very much linked to Throny, but is not Throny, and people think it is. And the ancestral one that has evolved now to sort of suit certain people, right? To manipulate certain people, right? Even the new the Israel with the new covenant, people have tried to convert it into a school, right? And the truth is that, well, you could try to convert it into a school. I guess, Liruna, we are in a rush. For those who've attended Israel with me, they know that it takes me forever, right, to get anything done near Israel, right? Because I've been for Israel since 17 years old, right? And at the time, I didn't know that you could be, let's say my age, you could be 36 and you are high up there, right? At the time, from what I understood from my grandmother, it really was not like that. You were given, like, let's say, your own church when you have matured and you were quite old and you'd seen it all, right? So that's why that old Israel didn't need the twassing, because when you twassa, it's like you are experiencing baholo, bokoko le bomkhulu, an entity that would rather initiate you or teach you wisdom now at a younger age, the wisdom of somebody who is much older, being your great-grandmother, right? So that is why Israel is dumele mo badimong, right? It would be time, it would be your experience, kathapelo, and this routine that would teach you, right? And eventually you would have, under the old Israel, you would have your own church, right? After you've been through all in life, right? So now the new covenant people, they also have their form of Israeli. It's beautiful when done correctly, right? Some people, like I'm saying, have said that this new covenant Israel, Throny are the same thing, but no, they are not, right? Israel will always be a masculine energy. And because the Nyelula Israeli is an energist, it will allow any and every interpretation, as long as it is an interpretation that seeks to ascend your dimensions of spiritual connection and your dimensions of spiritual thinking. Okay, now, on to why I'm wearing earrings and lipstick. Got running. Let's say go ZCC, St. John's, blah, 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 blah. They don't wear lipstick still, right? But they've got a lot of basic key components of what Israeli is. If you've ever been to any of the churches, Utako Israeli, you will see. You would know what that is. So each church, ZCC Postola, has got an element of something, a practice that we do Ko Israeli. It's just that Ko Israeli, they're all compounded, right? Sephiri, because now you start to see Sephiri of different churches, right? So Throny now started to emerge as what you guys call the proper New Age church. And if you guys want to see or you want to test, but to have gone and they did not find the right one, or were under the spiritual guidance of somebody whom they did not align with. Most of them, after that, right? Your Zoe church, your Rema churches, that are still like Africans. It's still Africans, right? And they will go to those churches to sort of abate or to avoid right? Why? Because people have said that once you can't get out, right? I didn't know that you can until this year when I was given the download, the revelation ya Throny. I did debate that thing. I didn't know how to get that Throny, and only afterwards was I told, right? So Throny now in modern time, right, is masqueraded in the New Age churches, right? Where now you're seeing Baruti throwing water at people, healing them with water, anointing oils, and all of those things, right? That is still an expression of Throny and ultimately an expression of Tshebeletso Phiri, right? But Throny is the more modern version of Tshebeletso Phiri. And ask your grandmothers and your great-grandmothers, when they decide, I kid you not, either by St. Johnning, which also represents Linyelula Throny, right? And they stop going to Tshebeletso Phiri, or they go to a New Age church, right? The real difference between the two is in their concept of light and how they perceive light, right? Both of them speak or perceive the light from God, but for Israeli, the perception of light and illumination and spiritual wisdom is through the Old Testament, where God instructs the children of Israel how to connect with him. For Throny, the light, Throny is more New Testament based, right? It is more New Testament based. So it is still seeing Jesus Christ, Libadimo, through the New Testament, right? Ko Throny, strictly, white candles, strictly prayer, nothing else, right? If ko Throny, you unalinyelwe la seporofeto, like me, na ke krile my gift as profeto from Israel, then the combination Israeli, and when I move it over to Throny, I'll use diwasho, but almost minimal, right? Kwa go bereka metsi, just like Baba, the New Covenant Israel, right? But the light, the definition of light and wisdom, according to Throny, right, and spiritual ascendance is the light of heaven in the sense ya Throny. Ko Throning, it is the light of seeing the God within you, right? And it is more revelations based, or rather book of prophecies based. Throny is really centered around decoding books that's prophet, right? And decoding what they mean. Go Israeli, the idea of spiritual ascension is by instruction and following the law and how God says people should connect with him to search for the light within, which is the light of God within you, right? Both of them have got the narrative of Jesus Christ's life, and Go Israeli, it's the life and death, the birth, life, and death of Jesus Christ. For the New Covenant, it's mainly his life and eventual death and resurrection. So that's where the Trinity is based. For Throning, it's his death on earth, resurrection, and his new coming, the New Jerusalem. So there is a trinity of concepts here with all three these elements, right? But they are being seen, perceived in different ways. Go Throning, now I can go and preach Throny, let me say, or I can teach Throny in Kobatung, right? It doesn't need to be a private initiation, right? So I'm doing this class for those who've been asking me, Throny ki in Israeli king, right? Okay. And then there is another form of Israeli that I found out. Yabatswan. Right? So when Tate Matira was driving Israel in this ancestral element, and the people of the New Covenant were also starting their own thing, which is more recent, there was another form of Tshebeletso ya Sephiri ya Batswana, right? Batswana Baziraste, probably from Botswana. They did not wear white or blue or yellow or that. They wore gray dresses, right? For them, Tshebeletso was not, there wasn't any of the mukites and the flags, the flagships and the opulence. It was never a big group. This Tshebeletso, the people who had been shown this form of Tshebeletso as Sephiri, normally would be a family, right? People there still did it as a family. Linyelwilateng wears a gray munazareta. If they wear a belt, it's just a belt, right? Hardly mbitani, right? They don't even need to wear a speaker, just that gray and a white dog. So those people, they were practicing Tshebeletso ya Sephiri, but almost like the apostolic way. They would do this privately, mo matlong a bona, right? With just a single white candle, right? It was more like Postola, but it was like an apostolic church. You would never know. So they went libona to their normal Orthodox churches, right? And then on a certain day, Saturday is a very good day for them. Wednesday, also a good day. Thursday, also a good day for them, right? For the people by Lunguri, this form of Tshebeletso ya Sephiri was in their homes. But to bateng ne ba kena kereke every night. So Tshebeletso ya Sephiri became like a prayer every night, right? They would have a code, but the code was not the code that we know. It was only snippets of it, right? So to this day, those people, and the gifts that thing when they when they dream of bonkuku babone wearing gray in a room barapela, normally kukwateng, because she knows that that form of tshebeletso is no longer really being done. That was like tshebeletso that you got from a parent, right? Your granny woman is insisting that you all pray every day, right? The gray robe, they would just do it kamuntung. Now let's say it was you who had that robe, then you would then practice Israeli more towards linyelwe la Throny. Linyelwe la Throny, right? Linyelwe la Throny wears white dukes and largely white. So if you're a descendant of somebody like that, then you would wear white. Your gift as prophet would be white. And linyelwe la Throny, like I said, allows you to have your nails and whatnot. All right. But those people would have a gift, a spiritual gift, a prophetic mermaid spirit. It would be mermaid spirit still. It would be prophetic, balozi and all of that. They would take all of that. They would take all, linyelwe la gray takes all of those that you call malbalozi, mundao, blah, 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 and converts them all into the gifts of God. Right? So that's that. Right? Gogon Tabi, you can't really learn much about Ntate Matira. I didn't know about him until I started doing readings, and almost like he was telling me things through readings. So a lot of his, initially when I started doing like the readings for people, but that were coming from that form of Israeli would come for consultations with me, right? There are some trends that I would pick up, and I would get some messages from him. And what is very interesting is that Ntate Matira as a Zozi, right? He is a Mundao, not even Mutwatsebeleto. Every time he comes to me in visions, dreams, waperenjete merun. That is, by the way, that is also where the concept yabatwa paranjete merun and white motlogong symbolizing Israel comes from. Right? Njete maroon and white, you don't ever wear it motlogong. But the people they would feel almost intuitive, they'd feel inclined to wear it. Right? But njeti eo is a masquerade, no, there is some ox blood. Right? There. Okay? So those are the different forms. Now, for those who say, last week a friend of mine told me, my older sister that I respect, she told me there's a channel, more YouTube, where people are talking about Sephiri and how much they've had enough, right? And that they want to get out, right? Because, some people have not been initiated properly, it's been really hard. Now, if you were not meant to be in the ancestral version of Israel, and you were meant to be in the older version, prophetic, or in the new covenant version, and you are here, it's a problem. It's a problem, right? Most of that here now, people have now started to want or to direct people who twaza bajentwazo. It's a problem. It's a problem, right? And she was telling me about this channel where people are even, saying the codes, that people start telling them that, they can get people out of prison, they can get away with crimes using Israel codes, and that's not true, right? That's not true, right? So those people on that on the YouTube page are saying that they've had enough and they want to get out. There are some people whom I've done readings with and they are tired and they're like, I've tried to walk this journey at Israel and it's looking really dark, mainly because of the levels and the codes. It becomes a problem, right? And if you are there where you feel like you are in the middle of a seesaw and you don't understand if you are going forward or backwards, then go Throny, right? Or join the class at Throny. That's what it's for. Throny immediately, because it is the feminine version of Israeli, the feminine exposed version, right? Then you're taking all of these garments sa Israel with the code that you would need to be given by a spiritual parent. When you move them to Throny, now you're moving them straight back to Linyelui la Israel, to God, or rather to Linyelui la Throny. There, the code is not necessary. The code is going to come in a different way, and there is a totally different code, and the codes are unique for each person. You will be given the code for each garment through the Bible, right? And it's not a specific code. It is a unique code for each individual. Okay, so that's what the class that I'm hosting on Throny le Israel is. Class ya Israel, you can only attend if you've been initiated through Tshebeletso ya Sephiri. And I am going to check for it, make sure that I'm having the right people, right? Class ya Throny, you can attend it if you feel that you are not making headway go Israel and you would like to now divert that gift into Throny. Throny is also a good space holder, right? Because you can function in your spirituality and whatever you needed to get from Israel, or rather from, let's say, a certain level of Israel, you get it here and you don't even need a spirit mother for that, right? But Throny does require almost religious biblical studies and prayer. Okay, that is your requirement. Right. I will say that once you've gone through Throny, just like the initial Israel, when you go through Throny, the need yampepo, the need for this, the need for that, goes away. Right? Goes away completely. You are going to be doing this. Throny is going to align you and to get your ancestors to align. You're going to align with the spirit nature, the spirit version of what you call Badimu, the all in all, the oneness in all of us, the God in all of us, right? I remember asking Kuku not so long ago, with spirituality, are there levels of ascension? And Kuku said to me, there's 8 dimensions. She said to me, 8 dimensions of spiritual ascension. I was like, okay, I didn't know. I thought there was 9 or 7. And she said, no, there's 8. And she said to me, Linyelui la Israel is at the 5D. So she said to me, when you can understand Israel le Throny very well, your level of consciousness and connection with universal energies, right? And the all in all and the God in all, right? You would be able to, it would be easier for you to move towards 4. Apparently, I've not gotten to 4D. So I don't know what type of spiritual evolution needs to happen for you to get to 4D. And I remember when I said, yeah, but they said, we are living in a 3D world. And she said, yes, you live in a 3D world, but the majority of you guys live at a 2D vibration. And she said, that's why you guys feel like lefatshe la lepalla, and you guys feel like you've got no understanding. The world is created at 3D. Your physical flesh is created at 3D, right? And that dimension does not move because it's the tangibility of things. And Gugu said, but you guys are vibrationally at 2D. And that's why living here on earth feels so unbearable for you guys. So I'm going to put up the link, all right, for spiritual classes. I do spiritual classes also on how to connect with your ancestors. So this is outside of Throny le Israel. Look, this has got to do with you, right? It's a 4-hour class. I take a class only when there's 10 people. Classes are 500 and it's 4 hours. So we normally do it over 2 days. So we do 2 hours here and then 2 hours at a few days. And I give you guys homework and all of that. Then you guys can learn like the basic principles on how to connect with your ancestors, right? The basic principles of what Msamo truly is, not what you guys have been taught, right? The basic principles of what Idlozi is, right? And from which perspective you would like to connect with your ancestors, because even they work at different vibrations. So I guess I've been quiet because I've been getting some spiritual teachings myself, and I've been becoming more and more awakened, right? Lastly, okay, I'm going to put up the link in the class, and then for the class group, and I'm hardly active there. I only announce and then that's that. Lastly, I had a reading last week, and that lady said to me, you know, we used to look forward to your readings and your classes. Please come back. And I was like, okay, yeah, but I don't know if I'm ready to start giving teachings. So we will find a date. I will definitely be back this coming week. I will choose a day, and then you guys can choose different topics and what you want to talk about, right? Yeah. In closing, I've graduated from Gogo Khanda Lembube. Well, Kining I graduated the Gogo Khanda Lembube. So I've graduated. And she has asked me to say good evening and to greet you guys in a more prophetic way. She said, Togoza is no longer for me because I'm done with the ancestral element of my gift. So it's time to move on to other elements, right? So apparently I'm tossing from an elemental point of view. But I think I'm going to make that one of my first few teachings. Look, I'm going to make that my first few teachings. I'm going to still teach you guys a lot of universal truths, okay? I feel like that's where I'm going now. Right? I'm going to teach you guys elemental things, whether you like, these are things that we cannot debate, right? Whether you believe in Jesus or you don't, right? So I feel like that's the direction that I'm taking, and I can't wait for that. Have a great evening, everybody. Love and light. Namaste, blessings. Amen. You know, I'm still unsure which one works and gels with me. Have a great night, and I hope this has given you guys clarity between Israeli, Sephiri, and Throny, so that you guys know, right? All right. Have a great evening. I'm still allowed to call you guys that. You are still Bahulu. So have a great evening, and see you guys very soon.